welcome. And thank you everybody for being part of this informational session on housing, key to sustainable growth and economic prosperity. I'm Kathy Hunter and I chair the Housing Committee. And before we get started, we'll turn this over to Mika Cardozo, our first selectman, to say a few words.
Good evening, folks. First of all, thank you for taking time out of your evening. It's a beautiful night. We were just saying up there, it might keep some people away from it, and thank you very much for coming in and taking the time to do this. Kathy will be introducing our esteemed panel momentarily, but I just wanted to, thank them for taking the time, and we put together a panel of experts. She'll tell you a little bit more about that. But here in town, in many towns, virtually every town in Connecticut, housing is a challenge. It's an issue that everyone is dealing with. My sense is that we really need to establish a foundational understanding in terms of what really the issues are, what the challenges are, and what can be done about it. And that's part of what we go over today. The more we learn, the better prepared we are to very thoughtfully and very methodically work toward that growth in terms of what's needed as far as not only our town is concerned, but the region, the state, and the country for that matter. So that's one of the things. This is one part of what we hope will be a number of many more informational type sessions where we can have a dialogue. We have our public comments at our different meetings, but oftentimes it's not truly a dialogue. So we're looking forward to you answer or asking some questions that you have as relates to this, and try to keep it as interactive as possible. But more than anything, we're here to learn. I'm really feeling like my responsibility is to get things started. One thing I've learned in the 15, 16 months that I've been here is things do take time, but they don't get done if you don't get them started. So what we need to do is we need to get things started. And this, again, as I said, this is kind of laying the foundation to get those things underway so that we can make a difference and we can make our town vibrant and really increase in growth that's desperately needed at this time. So with that, Kathy, I'll bring it back to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Well, this should be a very engaging session. We did assemble a panel of experts who will be addressing the intersection of housing, community development, and local economic growth. Before we get started, I just want to do a little housekeeping. The Housing Committee will be hosting other informational sessions on housing. So if there's topics you want to hear more about, please let us know by writing them down on the yellow piece of paper that's back there at the table. Also, we will be taking questions from the floor, but if you rather write your question on an index card, we do have those as well. So feel free to grab an index card and wave it, and we'll grab that and make sure your question is answered. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists. And with us, we have Michael Santoro. He is the Director of the Office of Policy Research and Housing from the Connecticut Department of Housing. And next to Michael, we have Phoebe Plouffe, who is a Program Officer at WISC, doing housing and capacity building for towns. And here we have Dale Proof, who is the Director at Community Resource Management, LLC, and he has also been providing technical assistance to our Economic Development Commission. And finally, we have David Morgan. He's the President and CEO of Team Inc., a human services agency serving our region that includes the town of Woodbridge. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Justin LaFountain, who serves as a town planner. And he is the Senior Vice President of Planning and Economic Development in Goma, New York, and he will be moderating tonight's session. With that, Justin.
Thank you, Kathy. As Kathy mentioned, my name is Justin LaFountain. I've been the town planning consultant for just under a year now for the town of Woodbridge. A little bit of background about me. Prior to being the Senior Vice President of Planning and Economic Development with Goma, New York, I was the Town Planning Director for the towns of Bloomfield and Wethersfield. And prior to that, I was a regional planner with the Southeastern Connecticut Council of Governments for about 5 years. So I have the pleasure of moderating this great group tonight. We're very, very lucky to have all these people with us. They're all experts in their fields, and it's very exciting for me to be able to sort of guide some discussion amongst them. So the way tonight's going to work, I'm going to go over just some introductory sort of background data. Then we're going to sort of follow this list. Each one of these panelists is going to give a brief background, brief sort of presentation of what they do and how it relates to housing and economic development. And then we'll take some questions from you guys. I think what we'll do is we'll take some questions in between each presentation, and then at the very end, we'll just open it up fully to questions. So, to get started. You're all Woodbridge residents, and you all love your community. We're very thankful that you're here. So we just wanted to go over a little bit about the town. You probably know a lot of this, but just in case. So Woodbridge is just over 9,000 people. The average household size is about 2.74. So you have some households that are, smaller, more of a single-family household, and it goes all the way up to multiple children in the household. As you can see below that, the education level in Woodbridge is extremely high. 72% have a bachelor's degree or a postgraduate degree of some sort. And the household income is also quite high. You can see on the bar chart at the bottom left that the vast majority here of the population makes over $200,000 a year. On the right-hand side of this, you see a tool that we use at Goma, New York quite a bit. It's called Placer AI. And what it uses is cell phone data to sort of monitor where people are going in the community, how long they're spending there, what they're doing there, that kind of thing. So what we've done is we've sort of mapped out the commercial area in Woodbridge, and we've taken a look at how many people are coming into that area. So you can see that there are about 1.2 million visits per year into that area, with 322,000 visitors. So what does that mean? Why don't those numbers match up? That's because you have people going multiple times. You have one person who's going in multiple times to that area. And the average dwelling time in that space is 71 minutes. So these people are spending a decent amount of time there. You have people that are shopping, dining, or they live there, because there's also residential in that area. Bottom right-hand side, you see the visits per time of day, and you can see it's really kind of spread out throughout. We know that people are living there because you do see at the 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. range, there are still a good number of people who are visiting on an average day. We're going to talk a little bit about the labor force, because a lot of what tonight is talking about how housing relates to economic development. At Goma, New York, we have a phrase that housing is where jobs go at night. In order to have jobs, you really need to have housing to be able to support those people. Without having the housing in the area that they're in, you're not going to be able to get future economic development because you don't have the workforce necessary for it. So you can see that Woodbridge has a labor force of about 4,700 people. Pretty small for the area as a whole. What you can see on the second column is SCROG, which is the Southern Central Connecticut Regional Council of Governments. But what you see is that the unemployment rate in Woodbridge is quite low. Only 2.3% of people in Woodbridge are unemployed, compared to the state average of 3.7%, which is pretty good. That's what we like to see. On the right-hand side, this is a breakdown of what kinds of fields people work in who live in Woodbridge. You can see that not the majority, but plurality work in the educational services field. So they're teachers, they're professors. Obviously, you know that we have a lot of schools right around here, so they're working there. And then right below that, again, no surprise, you see a lot of healthcare. Right here in New Haven, you have a lot of hospitals where people are working as well. But what you can tell from this is a lot of the people working around here are highly educated. They have advanced degrees in either education, health, professional science degrees, things like that. One interesting statistic here is that 93% of people working in Woodbridge travel from outside of the community to work in Woodbridge. So what that means is only 7% of the people who work in town live in town. That number is quite low. And again, that gets back to the fact that we have possibly not enough housing here to support the workforce. 54.5% of employees in Woodbridge travel from fewer than 10 miles to get here, which means that they live close by, but not in Woodbridge itself. This is an interesting graph on the right-hand side here. It's probably a little tough to see. I apologize for the lighting, but what you see is a couple of different bars here. And what it's trying to compare is the cost of housing compared to the student enrollment. So as you can see, the cost of housing has sort of it decreased for a while, and then of course it increased, as everyone knows, with COVID. It sort of skyrocketed with COVID. What you can see, the top line, that very light sort of teal blue line, that is the Amity High School enrollment. So you can see that that has generally declined over the years. However, If you look at the bright green neon line, you can see that the Beecher Road School has fairly increased throughout the years. So one of the things we're going to talk a little bit tonight is how do we work with that while still adding more housing potentially, and also being able to support and make sure our school has enough room, enough space, and able to succeed the same way it always has.
Just before you go off of that,
Yeah.
what's the years? The years are on the bottom, correct?
Yes, they are. So the far left is 2006, and the far right is 2024. And again, I apologize, it's a little tough to read with the lighting here. The left-hand chart just shows that the year that households moved in, and you can see that on the left-hand side, that's the dark blue, that's showing people who own houses, and then you have a very, very small percentage of people who are renting in Woodbridge. No surprise, we don't have a lot of rental properties here. This sort of expands a little bit about that. It takes Woodbridge and compares it to, on the top, New Haven County as a whole, and on the bottom, bordering towns without New Haven. We realize that New Haven isn't something that's fully comparable with Woodbridge. It's a city, it's much denser, it's a whole different animal. So what that's comparing is towns like Seymour, Bethany, Orange, that kind of thing. So on the top left, you can see the number of owners versus renters in Woodbridge. The owners are in blue and the renters are in yellow. And it's breaking it down by the number of people per household. So when you have a one-person household, that's where you see the most number of renters. It's still a small percentage, but that's where you see the most. Once you get to 2 people, that number goes down. 3 and 4 people, you have even a smaller number of renters. Compare that to New Haven County as a whole, you see that bright yellow bar, which is obviously much larger. You have a lot more renters throughout the county as a whole as opposed to in Woodbridge. Bottom left, we're sort of seeing the same exact thing, where we are seeing over the course of time. Woodbridge has stayed remarkably consistent over the years in terms of the number of renters versus ownership. And the bordering towns have as well. There's really not a lot of change there. Throughout the state, you see a difference in that, but in this area itself, it's been pretty consistent. Some of these slides are going to be geared a bit towards, some of the people on our panel tonight. They focus a little bit on the economic development, which Dale will talk about. But this slide here is talking about the average costs of the area median income. When we talk about affordable housing, you often hear this AMI phrase, which means the area median income for households in the area. So what these charts do is they break down in terms of the area median income based on the number of people in your house. So if you look at on the top chart here, you see where it says 80% of AMI, and you see the bold number, $90,960. So at 80% AMI, a family of 4 needs to make $90,960 to qualify for deed-restricted affordable housing at 80% AMI. A lot of people here, and unless you already know this, a lot of people here might be thinking that's pretty high for an affordable housing rate, which is true. We have a significantly higher income in this area, and therefore the rates of AMI are going to be increased based on that. And then on the bottom table, you see the breakdown of studio 1-bedroom units, all of those things based on the AMI as well. So if you look at a 2-bedroom unit at 80% AMI, it's $2,048. That is the rent that could be charged for an 80% AMI restricted unit. Obviously, I'm not going to go through all of these numbers, but what I will say is this is being recorded, and this presentation will be available on the town website, so you can dig into this as much as you want later on. Now here, we take a look at the age pyramid for Woodbridge. So on the left-hand side, you see 2010. On the right-hand side, you see the most recent 2024. An age pyramid, for those of you that don't know, it basically takes down the ages of males and females in the community and breaks them down into roughly 5-year segments. So you can see the very bottom is a population that's 0 to 4 years old, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, so on and so forth. So what you can see is that Woodbridge loses a lot of people in that 20 to 35, potentially 40-year area. They're leaving the community. They grow up here, they move on, they move out. There's a variety of reasons for that. Some is to seek different jobs. I mean, I grew up in Connecticut, and out of college, I moved to Kansas to take a job. So we can't really predict all cases, but when you have such a dramatic decline like that, we do have to start asking, well, why? Why are young people really leaving at that rate? By comparison, if you see the dotted line that's sort of hugging the outsides of these, that is the average for the South Central Connecticut planning region. So that is showing that, again, in that young person area, the young adult area, you have a significantly fewer number of people compared to the rest of the region. One of the things to also consider here is, obviously, as people age, people either move, unfortunately pass away, or they're trying to find a smaller place to live. You know, a lot of people that grew up and, you know, maintained a family in a 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom house, they no longer have the, whether it be financial, physical capabilities to maintain that house. So how do we keep them in Woodbridge? How do we make sure that they are staying in Woodbridge to be able to continue to fund the economy, make sure that they are living where they want to live? Anecdotally, I've heard a variety of stories where people say that they want to continue to live in town, but they can't find a place to do so. They just can't afford it. They can't find a small enough place to maintain what they'd like. So it's important to sort of look at that and be able to see, well, how do we keep them here? What can we do to make sure that our aging population can age in place if they want to do so? In this last slide here, this is a breakdown of the brand list in Woodbridge, sort of by type. You can see, I'm sure this is no surprise to you, 93.31% of your brand list in Woodbridge is residential. It comes from your residential tax base, and your commercial base is only 4.78%. So less than 5% is based on your commercial real estate. Another about 1% is industrial. That's a relatively high, in fact, a significantly higher portion of residential tax dollars than we'd like to see, because what that means is it puts the tax burden on you. You are paying a higher tax rate because there isn't enough commercial industrial space to be able to fund some of the tax dollars in town. So one of the things that we're going to be talking about tonight is how do we add housing in a way that is going to benefit this so it takes the burden of the finances of the town off of the people and puts it onto some businesses instead. That's really the goal with a lot of economic development. We don't like to see a highly burdened population for tax dollars. What we do like to see is larger businesses and whatnot being able to fund some of that as well. One of the things to consider here is apartments are usually classified in the commercial asset class. The reason for that is because it is a money-making operation. The residents are paying a landlord to be able to live in that space. So some of what we'll talk about tonight is by putting apartments into this, it's actually going to boost your commercial category as opposed to your residential category. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Mike Santoro, who's the Director of Office Policy Research and Housing Support for the state of Connecticut.
Good evening, thank you. Again, Mike Santoro, State of Connecticut, Department of Housing. I'm not going to talk a lot of numbers. The remainder of the panel will spend a lot of time talking about data. I'm going to talk about who we are and what we do at the Department of Housing. We're organized under Chapter 127C of the Connecticut General Statutes for anybody who cares. I'm sure some of you do, and very few, most of you don't. This next part is very important, however. Our mission is to ensure everyone has access to quality housing opportunities and options throughout the state of Connecticut. I'll get back to that a little later on, but the language is very important. What do we do at the department? Well, we provide financial assistance, as you can see from this list, and as Justin pointed out, this is going to be recorded. You can go back and look at some of the detail if you'd like at some point in the future. Suffice to say, we do a lot. We do a lot of very different things. We also build, although not directly. We leverage our development community, for-profit, not-for-profit, local housing authorities, to create affordable housing opportunities throughout the state. But we don't just leverage other people's money for affordable housing. When we create affordable housing units, we are creating housing opportunities as well as in the market range. Okay, what else do we do? Well, we administer federal formula grants. And if you don't know what federal formula grants are, there are things like the Community Development Block Grant, Small Cities Program, HOPWA, which is Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS, 2 primary construction programs, HOME and the National Housing Trust Fund, or NHTF. We are also a member of the Continuum of Care, and in this case, the Continuum of Care Balance Estate. They are the social service system throughout the country, and in terms of the state of Connecticut, there are only 2 continua of care. One is Fairfield County, and the other is the balance of the state of Connecticut. We're a grant administrator. As well, if everybody remembers, a short while back we had something called COVID hit. The federal government put a lot of money in place to help communities and states deal with COVID. There was a very large pot of money from our standpoint put in place by the feds called the Emergency Rental Assistance. There were 2 phases, 1 and 2. We administered both. It was a little under $500 million total. We are in the process of wrapping up those 2 grants right now. Finally, we're the agency of cognizance for local housing authorities. What that means is we don't manage or oversee local housing authorities, but we review their audits. We are responsible for making sure that if they have one, that they're doing things within the statutory obligations. Oh wait, we also do more. We provide technical assistance to housing authorities, as I mentioned a minute ago, but more importantly, to municipalities. As a matter of fact, we provided a grant to help the town of Woodbridge hire Justin and his firm to do planning purposes for your community, and you can thank the first selectman for banging down doors and making that happen. We provide technical assistance to municipalities directly as well in the form of guidance, materials, samples, and if they have a question about housing, we're here to help. How do we do it? Well, again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time. If you're interested in what we do, how we do, and the various programs that we administer, our web address is on the screen. There you will find funding opportunities, notices, publications, a detailed description of each and every program that we administer now or that we administered that still has a compliance component. If you are interested in getting information on what we do, when we do, how we do, while we are doing it, you can join our Community Partners Distribution List. If you will just send an email to that address, we will add you to our distribution list. Right now, our distribution list is at around 500. They're predominantly organizations, housing developers, or organizations that do housing or have a housing-related purpose. We solicit public comment, public participation. One of the things that we, as a state agency, are very good at is collaboration. We work with almost every other state agency that touches housing and economic development at any point in time. We in fact work for, very often, the Department of Economic and Community Development. We partner with them on a regular basis in terms of application evaluation and review. So, what's next? What do we need to do? So I think everybody knows that not just the state of Connecticut, but the country has a housing problem. Well, for us, we are identifying what housing need is and how we intend to address that housing need. Letting the screen go for a minute. We're in the middle of, or actually we're at the tail end of our consolidated plan for housing and community development process. We are required by both the feds and state statute to prepare what is called a 5-year con plan. It details where our priorities lie, identifies housing need across the state, and how we intend to prioritize any of our activities to address that need. If you have not had an opportunity to look at our con plan, I ask you, please do so. You have until May 2nd. We've had a 30-day public comment period. We did 4 regional roundtables to collect information and participation at the local level. We got a lot of positive feedback about our plan, and I'm going to get a little more detail on that in a minute. But we want your help in getting our plan put together so that we can best prioritize what we're going to do with the money that the legislature and the governor put in place to help us. A message I want to get across: we are here to help you. We're not going to tell you what to do, where to do it, how to do it. But if you have something that you want to do for and in your community, we can and we want to help you do it. In short, housing need can be categorized into 4 basic concepts. Substandard housing related to plumbing, substandard housing related to eating facilities, overcrowding, and cost burdens. And Justin spent a little time talking about cost burdens, and again, I'm not going to throw numbers at you. There's plenty of that out there. There's about 100 pages of housing data in our consolidated plan that can talk about need. And I'm sure you've seen in the papers, people talk about, oh, we need 100 or 110 or 120,000 housing units. I will tell you right now that is a false statement. What we have is 120,000 people, households, in the state of Connecticut that are paying more than they should for their housing. They are paying more than 30% of their income towards the cost of their housing. We don't need to build 110 or 120,000 units. We need to create 110 new housing opportunities to help those families be able to afford where they are living, so that they can also afford to pay for their health care, their clothing, their food, their medical costs. Okay? Statement at the bottom says it. We need to better match a household's ability to pay with housing opportunities that they can afford. Well, how are we going to do it? Well, from our position, these are the very strategies we intend to employ over the next 5 years to try to address some of that need. Okay? And I do say some. The state of Connecticut cannot on its own address all of the housing need across the state. We need your help being your community's help. Every community in the state of Connecticut, without exception, has some kind of housing need. I don't know what your individual community's particular need may be. I say that only because I'm required to say it that way. I think I can easily, based on the statistics that you're going to see later, identify at least one clear need in your community. You need housing opportunities for your aging population so that they don't have to live in the 3, 4, and 5 bedroom house that they can no longer maintain. Whether that's rental or whether that's ownership is something that you as a community can decide. But don't get hung up on the fact that when you think about affordable housing, a lot of people think, oh, big 40, 50, 60 unit structures with teeny tiny apartments. That's not the only kind of housing for older persons, notice I didn't say elderly, live in, okay? I'm going to end there by simply saying one more time, we are here to help. We don't want to tell you what to do. We don't tell you that you have to do anything. But if you want to help your community, we want to help you do that. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll open it up to just a couple questions for Mike now, if anybody has one. To get it started, Mike, I'll ask you a question myself here. You mentioned something that I think I remember, but I'm not quite sure, something about COVID. How does that, you know, a lot of us have seen prices of homes and rentals increase significantly since COVID. How has that impacted housing affordability throughout the state as a whole?
Thanks for the question, Justin. Really, it's affected housing affordability in many different ways. One, the cost of creating housing opportunities has increased significantly. We are looking at probably 35 to 40% increase in a per unit cost when it comes to trying to create new housing opportunities, whether that's new construction or substantial rehabilitation. I won't even get into the costs associated with preservation, which is, if anybody, and from what I understand, most of your homeowners, think about what it is costing you today to maintain the home that you have. Pre-COVID, you could rehabilitate your own bathroom, okay, and do it at a reasonable cost, call it $7 grand, okay? Today, do you need to renovate your bathroom to make it more up-to-date, more elder person friendly? You're looking at $11,000, $12,000, $15,000 to do that same renovation as it would have cost you 5 years ago. That's just on the housing cost construction side. We haven't even talked about the impact on insurance, labor, and energy. And I'm not going to get into the energy argument. Let me just say, one of the biggest costs to household housing costs is related to utilities, energy costs. Everybody in this room has, I am sure, has experienced a significant increase in the amount of money you are paying whatever your utility is, whether it's natural gas, electric, propane, or oil. No supplier has been let off the hook. They're getting hit repeatedly, and those costs get passed on to us. I'll end with the last one, insurance. Everybody in this room has to understand insurance in the state of Connecticut and in the Northeast overall has gotten way out of hand. And I found out a short while ago why, and I'll be happy to share. Many people don't know, and I didn't, that there's actually a secondary market for insurance. That is, your insurance company sells their risk to another insurance company, who in turn sells their risk to another insurance company, and so on, and so on, and so on. So you can look around at the landscape and say, well, we haven't had a lot of natural disaster here in the state of Connecticut. Why are our insurance rates going through the roof? Well, the short answer is this. We're paying for the mudslides and the wildfires in California. We're paying for the tornadoes in the Midwest. We're paying for the flooding in Florida. It is that simple. So, keep in mind, housing affordability is not just about the house and creating it. It's how do we maintain it, how do we keep it operating, how do we maintain what we have without letting it deteriorate and lose value. Thank you.
We did receive one question here. What are some trends already identified in community roundtables for the 5-year plan?
Again, thank you. What we're seeing is a lot of interest and a lot of need centered on housing for persons who are aging. Again, I'm going to avoid the elderly word because I'm one of them. I know I don't look it, but yes, I actually qualify for housing for elder persons these days. So that's one big thing. We also see a growing need for what is called permanent supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing is housing that comes with service opportunities. And I say it that way for a reason. Just because you live in permanent supportive housing doesn't mean you have to take the services, but the services are available to you as you need them. Right now, we've got about 6,000 permanent supportive housing units in the state of Connecticut. We are a national leader in the production of permanent supportive housing, but we need more. And communities are growing to recognize they have populations that have a need for those kinds of services, whether it's physical, mental, or otherwise.
All right, so for now, we'll move on to Phoebe, but again, at the end, we will open this up to all questions.
Hello, my name is Phoebe Plouffe. I'm a program officer at Liz, Connecticut, and today I'll be talking about our Community Housing Connections program. So I'll start by telling you all a little bit more about LISC in case you're unfamiliar. LISC is the Local Initiative Support Corporation, which is a community development finance institution, or CDFI, that was started in 1979 with money from the Ford Foundation. And the goal of the organization is really to help CDCs and local partners with community development. Our current mission is to collaborate with residents and partners to build resilient and inclusive communities across America, making great places to live, work, visit, do business, and raise families. A couple of our important roles are as an investor, which I'll talk a little bit more about. As a connector, which is really important, we're a very strong convener of partners. And as an innovator, looking for creative solutions to community problems. And then our strengths, LISC is a national organization with headquarters in New York City, but we do have 38 local offices across the nation that really help to bring that local expertise into our work. We have a very strong partner network with CDCs, community development corporations, developers, and all those important local organizations that come into play. And we also put an emphasis on financial inclusion. So the Community Housing Connections program focuses on work in suburban and rural communities. So I'll start by talking a little bit about affordable housing in those communities. Suburban and rural areas do tend to have a lower stock of affordable housing units. They also tend to have fewer rental units, and those who do rent in suburban and rural areas tend to spend more of their income on those housing costs. There are also fewer preservation efforts. There tend to be fewer preservation efforts in rural and suburban areas for dedicated affordable housing units. And an example of that is if somebody has a subsidy like a USDA mortgage, it often comes with guidelines to preserve that affordability for a set amount of time, usually somewhere between 20 and 40 years. And once that timeline is up, if somebody doesn't come in and renew that and put in the effort to preserve that affordability, those units can then become market rate units. So the Community Housing Connections program operates in municipalities across the state that have less than 10% affordable housing, primarily by providing technical assistance, capacity building, and lending opportunities to our partners. We work in communities that not only have fewer affordable housing units, but also have fewer resources available to them, whether that's groups that are working on housing or interested in affordable housing, or access to helpful groups like community housing, or centers for housing opportunity that exist in different regions throughout the state. And what the program really strives to do is create a pipeline of information, capable organizations, and affordable housing units. The overall goal of the program and the work that we do at LISC is to create a more affordable Connecticut, not only by increasing the amount of affordable units that we have, but also by stimulating local engagement and participation, like at events like this one. Building organizational capacity for first-time development projects, so that's the capacity building and technical assistance that can really help those small developers or local groups who are interested in developing affordable housing, but might not know how to take the first step. We also provide early stage lending to help projects be successful, and that focuses really on acquisition and pre-development lending. And then we stimulate conversation and convening around affordable housing in places that might not be having those conversations, but might have a lot of opportunity to develop some affordability. As a precursor, I'll talk about this project in a second, but as a precursor to the Community Housing Connections program, which is a relatively new program, it's been in operation for about 4 months. Previous to this, we had a program at LISC called Housing Connections, which was in operation from 2007 to 2021. And in that time, we did much the same work that we do today. And the result of that work was working with hundreds of organizations across the state that then developed their own nonprofits and went on to develop projects, and ultimately almost 700 units of affordable housing were developed with that program as well. So the next few slides, I'll talk a little bit about some programs that were helped, assisted by the Housing Connections program. So the first one is this wonderful project called Mallory View that is in Barkinstead. This project is entering construction, early construction. It's not completed yet. We did provide an acquisition loan for this project through the Housing Connections program, working with a wonderful organization, the Barkinstead Housing Trust, which is a local nonprofit. And ultimately, this will be 20 units of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom rentals that will be affordable for folks earning from 25% to 80% of the area median income. The second project is Wellington at Madison, and this is in Madison. This was also an acquisition loan through the Housing Connections program, and this was in collaboration with Hope Partnership and the Caleb Foundation. And this is 31 units of 1 and 2 bedroom rentals, 24 of which are affordable for those who earn 60% of the AMI or less. And what's interesting about this program, or this development, is that while there's these beautiful new construction units in the back, there's also the renovation of this beautiful historical home in the front, which added 4 units of housing to this project. And the final project that I'll talk about today is Stewart Farm, which is in Kent. This again was an acquisition loan through the Housing Connections program, and working with the wonderful group, Kent Affordable Housing Incorporated, and this was 13 units of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom rental, again for those who earn between 25 and 80% AMI. And this was completed in 2020, and again, similar to the Wellington at Madison project, this house right in the front on that bottom picture was an existing farmhouse that was renovated to create some units, and then the buildings in the back were added for additional space. So the last thing I'll touch on today, other than helping with investment and capacity building for projects, another thing that we really like to do at LISC is be really innovative and creative with helping different types of organizations get into affordable housing in creative ways. And one of those ways is working with faith-based organizations. As you may or may not know, across the nation and in Connecticut, churches are losing their parishes. They're shrinking, people are leaving the church, churches are having to kind of come together, which is leaving a lot of unused buildings, vacant land, underutilized spaces. So working with these organizations, first and foremost, can give you access to those underutilized spaces. Another thing that's really important at LISC is mission alignment, because it's important that we're providing housing for those who need it. And you often can find that mission alignment and community trust when working with faith-based organizations. Because they often have been in their communities for so long and had parishioners and members who lived in the communities, working with these organizations often provides you long-term stewardship, built-in community engagement networks, and also volunteer and philanthropic support. And then finally, what can be unique about working with these organizations is after the housing is completed, those folks who are living in that housing, that community doesn't disappear, and so they can help to provide supportive services, wraparound services, and holistic care to those who do move into that housing. And that is where I will leave it today. But if you would like to learn more about it, my contact information is here, and it'll go out with the presentation as well.
Thank you. Questions again for a couple, but I'll start off, so I did last time. Phoebe, you've worked with a lot of different communities, you've done sort of outreach sessions like this. What do you find some of the goals are of the communities that you've worked with? What are they trying to improve? What are they trying to benefit from these new developments?
Other than that many communities really need affordable housing for different populations, people are really interested in developing housing that works for their residents and that their residents have had buy-in in the process. And so it's important going into communities to have community engagement, which is what we've seen a lot of recently, is people wondering how they can spend more time talking about affordable housing, educate people about affordable housing, and get them interested in the process of development. And really the need, as far as who needs the affordable housing, in a lot of places it is that aging population, who is, for all intents and purposes, kind of stuck in those larger homes in these suburban and rural areas because the smaller stock just doesn't exist.
We get a couple questions for you, Phoebe. You showed some great pictures of some of the developments that you work with. Could you talk a bit more about why affordable housing units look like farmhouses in those examples?
Why they look like farmhouses? Yes. So it's important not only that you're getting community buy-in for the project, but it's also important that the projects that you're developing aren't a shock to the system, to people, or a stark difference from the existing stock in the area. And so Woodbridge is a very beautiful community. There's a lot of very large, gorgeous homes around here. And so that's why we showed a lot of projects that were done in Richfield County where that's kind of a similar feel. And it's important in those areas that you're creating housing that's really fitting in, where you could almost drive by and not even notice that there's 31 units behind that beautiful historical home. And so even if it's something like the Barkingside project, where it's 20 units that are all connected, it kind of looks like a rambling farmhouse, and it's on a street behind some existing development, and it's kind of an open area, and so it just kind of looks like the surrounding farmland, which can be important not only for those who are in the community already, but those who move into that housing who might not want to get negative attention from folks who want to live in housing that looks just like all of the housing that already exists.
Okay. One more question for now, and then we'll switch to this side of the room. This question actually going to open up to both Phoebe and Mike. What incentives are there for larger rental developments coming up on the expiration of their deed restrictions to re-up those deed restrictions?
I will let Mike start this discussion.
Thank you, Phoebe. Both my department of Housing, as well as Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, had a wide variety of options available to help existing affordable housing projects maintain that affordability. One thing I can say about HUD in a positive sense is that if you are already receiving assistance from them and you want to keep receiving that assistance, they will allow you to re-up with your assistance with them so you can maintain affordability in that project for another 20 or 40 years. That is something they have not gotten away from. There are other projects, particularly in what is called the low-income housing tax credit portfolio, that have what is called an expiring use. They agree to provide affordability for an initial period of time, and after that period, they can switch to market. 5 years prior to that expiration, both DOH and CHJ begin conversations with those owners to induce them to maintain the portfolio as affordable. We do that through refinance, through reinvestment, through restructuring existing debt. Essentially, if you can think it up, we either can do it, have done it, or will do it. We've gone so far as forgiven original principal and recast original interest that has accrued over the period of time as new debt into a brand new deal. Property was redeveloped, that is units were substantially rehabilitated, electrical, plumbing, insulation, doors, windows, siding, the whole 9 yards, to basically bring the property up to current conditions. Did it look different other than instead of the older looking siding, it's got new siding on it? Project didn't change its appearance in any way, shape, or form, maintained its affordability, but everybody in the property now has fiber, upgraded electrical systems, improved and updated plumbing and kitchens. We have and can do just about anything on our side of the shop to prevent those from expiring. The one thing we can't do is help an owner who doesn't want that. And we do get 1 or 2 of those every now and then. Pete?
I don't think I have anything to add to that. I think that was a great summary.
Thank you, guys. All right, we'll move on to Dale Coop.
Hello, can you hear me? I have no slides. You have to look right at me. Don't look at your phones. Well, thank you for having me tonight. My name is Dale Krupp, and as Justin introduced, I am Community Resource Management. I have been in the economic and community development field for over 40 years, doing both on the community development side, helping communities figure out what they want to do in their town, and also particularly in the economic development side for the last 30 years, I would say. And I am working with the town's Economic Development Commission, members of which are here tonight listening. And what I want to do is talk about housing in the context of economic development. Not to count the number of businesses, not to do anything like that, but to put it all in context. Not even to talk about affordable versus not affordable, but put it in the context of economic development. So first thing is I follow the data. It teaches me a lot in any of the towns. I've worked in Connecticut. I've worked in over 50 different towns. The town is very similar to Woodbridge in size, some bigger, some smaller. I've worked in 15 towns around the country, and a lot of the dynamics are the same when it comes to this issue. So using a little bit of Justin's data earlier on, but blending my own, I'll just go over a few things with you that sort of sets the stage. Before reval, your mill rate was around 46, maybe, right? Somewhere around there. And I know you're discussing your budget now, and the mill rate's going to be set in May. It's going to be in the low 30s. Whatever it's going to be, it's going to be. But the key statistic from Justin's slide is that your grand list total is about $1.5 billion. It's a little more than that, but in that sort of area. And the rule of thumb in dealing with affecting your taxation is if you drop a couple zeros, to affect 1 mil of taxation, and this is a rough number, you need to, in your case, you need to raise or either cut expenses or raise revenue somewhere in the vicinity of $1.3 million. So looking at the commercial area that you're working with, it's really important to be strategic about it and to be very active about it. And I want to talk a little bit about sort of your planning that's going on now. So that number really jumps out at me. You need $1.2 to $1.5 million of new revenue to lower taxes 1 mil. Think about that for a second. The other thing that Justin said that's really important is that 93% of the people that work in Woodbridge go home somewhere else and spend their money. They're not spending it here at night. Maybe a couple, a couple go to restaurants or whatever, but for the most part, they're shopping on the weekends in their own town, not in Woodbridge. So when you think about the need to grow the grand list and the need to grow the commercial sector, you need to kind of figure out what these businesses need. Now you're doing a lot of really great things in Woodbridge. There's a lot of planning activities going on, all of them leading to future grand list growth, better community development. First and foremost, you're working on your POCD, which will be your Plan of Conservation and Development, which is mandated by the state of Connecticut. And it will be done in 2025. Actually, by the fall, I believe it will be done. And that is the sort of vision for the town, community wealth, health, and well-being, housing, economic development, public spaces, parks and recreation, natural resources, all of that's built into the POCD. and it's mandated. So you're doing that, and the purpose of that is to really integrate all of those things to make a better community. But you also have some other ancillary things going on. You have a 2030 committee that was formed to look at basically what you consider the flats in that general area of town, which is, to build out placemaking, places where people will go, to build it out more, to make it even better, and to grow the commercial sector, which probably would include some housing. You also just joined Connecticut Main Street, which is a powerhouse program to help really supersize what's going on in, we'll call it the flats for now, but it really is an area bigger than that. And some of the members of that are also here in our audience tonight. So you have a lot of great things going on. You also have a reformed and re-excited Economic Development Commission. Mika reappoint basically the Board of Selectmen, I think, 6 out of 7 or 8 out of 9 are all new people. And part of my job has been to work with them on economic development planning for all these areas and other areas of town. So for example, on Bradley, off of Bradley in that industrial area, off to the side there, off of 69, you have some industrial uses, some manufacturing uses, other commercial uses, some doctors, a whole bunch of stuff over there. There's so many opportunities. And the Economic Development Commission is not just focused on the flats or any particular area of town. They're looking at the financial well-being of the whole town, and I argue to build community wealth for the younger generation. We all know what the incomes are, as Justin pointed out. We all know what the age brackets are, as Justin pointed out. But I'm thinking of the next generation of taxpayers, the people that are paying the taxes in 10 years from now. They're in high school and college, by the way, but you need to bring them in. So when I look at what you're doing actively, you have a very active EDC, you have many creative economic development initiatives going on. They cannot succeed without some conversation about housing. So let's talk about the workforce a little bit. So as Justin pointed out, 22% of your employees are in educational services. I'm presuming to be teachers or anything related to that. It's a broad category, but primarily related to education. Healthcare, 19.6%, and that statewide, regionally, every town in the state of Connecticut and probably in the Northeast, that's the fastest growing area of healthcare. If you did projections out to 2035, you'd see that healthcare is going to overtake pretty much every type of job. You have healthcare facilities. I joke, I'm 69 years old and I have like 7 to 9 doctors, okay? So you think about the demographics in Woodbridge and think about how many doctors are needed, how many healthcare facilities, large and small, assisted living, CCRC, you name it, you're always going to need more. Assisted living, memory care, it's all going to be part of your growing economy. Where do your police officers, firefighters, and EMTs live? I don't have the exact data, but anecdotally talking to people around town, they don't live in Woodbridge. There are some that do, but the majority do not. They live in North Branford, they live everywhere else. Why? Cost of housing, in most cases. Certainly not your school system, you have a very good school system. So when you look at the type of workforce that you have, I'm just going to pick on healthcare. Healthcare has changed dramatically and it will continue to change. In the old days, you had personal care assistants, RNs, LPNs in the nursing areas. They could work in multiple places and make a good living. Because of COVID, that completely shut down. And so many people in the healthcare industry, I know this because I do consulting work for some healthcare facilities, they had to choose between working in one place or another because of COVID. They couldn't bring, what they might have picked up somewhere. And that hasn't really changed. So it's relaxing a little bit. So the healthcare system and the incomes of those people are really affected. As Justin pointed out before, and Mike also illuminated, the incomes needed for employees to live somewhere are pretty high. You need about $91,000 to make basically a one-bedroom apartment in Woodbridge, and that's across the board statewide. One bedroom being about somewhere between $1,700 and $2,100 a month, depending on. So this is what your workforce is looking like these days. Now I'm just going to talk a little bit about the housing market. And also mention that Justin brought up the fact that young people always leave communities in every town, and some of them come back, but if they can't afford to live here, it's going to be a problem. The market in housing, and not necessarily affordable or market rate housing, or what is called in the hybrid world, workforce housing, right, Mike? Which is a tricky word, depending on what you mean. But most projects are for one bedroom and efficiencies. You'll get some developments that have apartments that are 2 bedrooms, but the predominant type of unit that are being built are 1-bedroom apartments. They are not houses and subdivisions. The cost of construction has exploded in the last few years. The cost of land, the cost of putting in utilities and septic system, really, really high. It's really all about apartments at 1-bedroom efficiency with a sprinkling of 2 bedrooms. Seniors. So seniors, I know enough about Woodbridge and other towns that I've worked in is that many seniors are house poor. They have wealth in their house, but they don't have income necessarily. So where are they going to go if they want to move? They have a 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom colonial. Where are they going to live? Is there enough even market rate or middle market housing for senior citizens? The answer is no. Virtually anywhere in Connecticut, not just Woodbridge. So there's an opportunity there, I see. I realize the sensitivity about the public school system in Woodbridge and having more and more kids come in and putting pressure on the taxpayers. I recognize that. I've heard it since I've been working in Woodbridge for part of a year, just like Justin. But there's many creative things you can do if you look at housing holistically. So for example, if you could develop a strategy for all types of housing in Woodbridge, let's say you have a strategy that really focuses on the middle market and affordable units for senior citizens. You're going to have natural attrition as they move out into those units by families that are bringing, some kids into the school system. But it won't be like subdivisions are going to be built. These are houses that are going to turn over in the normal real estate market. And if seniors can't afford to live here, they're going to move somewhere else. So the families want their parents to live somewhere else. My mom lives about a mile from me, and I thank God for that. So it's really important for seniors to live in their community when they decide to move, but how are they going to take care of that house? It's not getting any younger. So people in the workforce cannot afford, when you look at the types of jobs that are in your marketplace. The Economic Development Commission is charged with many things, but one of the things, the 2 or 3 things that I work with them on is a business retention strategy, keeping businesses that are already here. Most economic developers in the field or in the world that we operate in as consultants or as professionals will tell you that business retention is the most important thing that any town will work on. Because if not, your grand list will decline as older business owners retire. And I forgot to mention in my introduction, I was the Economic and Community Development Director in Hamden for 21 years before I became a consultant. I've been a consultant for about the last 4 years. So I've worked on the community development side and on the small business entrepreneurial side as well. Not big companies. When I was in Hamden, there are no big corporate companies. Although you have a few here, bigger companies, more than you realize in health sciences and STEM. And these are great opportunities, but where are the workers going to live? Whether it's market rate or affordable or workforce housing. So the way I look at housing in terms of economic development, and not to forget that the Economic Development Commission has a whole strategy for business recruitment. So you can imagine how hard that will be without any housing options. So when you think about all the planning that's going on in Woodbridge, you think about the ambitions of the Economic Development Commission, it's hard to not talk about housing. Housing is a tax generator, and I think Justin mentioned it. I'm not talking about subdivisions, I'm talking about apartments that would be coordinated with the efforts of the 2030 in Connecticut Main Street program to put disposable income into the businesses of Woodbridge. That's how you're going to attract them. If they don't see the numbers, they're not coming here. So again, you need $1.2 to $1.5 million of revenue. Where's that going to come from? Mostly the commercial side. So tax revenue, I can just give you one example in Hamden. There was a market rate program development in Hamden that was 20% affordable. by choice. They didn't take any state money, and it generated enough revenue, in our case, $2.5 million of tax revenue, which affected 1 full mil of taxation in Hamden. If you know anything about Hamden these days, the taxes are way higher than Woodbridge, way higher. So that was very meaningful. And these are all people that work at Yale and, in biotech or go to the Quinnipiac Medical School. So housing is important to encourage the development and success of the plan of conservation and development, the 2030 goals, the Connecticut Main Street goals, the economic development goals. That disposable income will be spent here, not in another town. And more importantly, when I look at the town holistically, I think of the civic infrastructure. Like I said, who's going to be running this town 10 years, 15 years? It's not going to be most of the people in this room. It's going to be the children or even the grandchildren in some cases. And where are they going to live? And where are they going to work? And do they want to open their business here to put down roots? So with that, I will wrap up my little presentation. Sorry, no slides, but that's the way it goes.
So we are getting some really, really good questions in. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right to David first because most of these questions I'd like to open up to everybody. So David, we will go to you.
Good evening, everyone. How we doing? We're halfway there. We're here till midnight. You might have saw it on the flyer. And this side is not the audience. This is the next set of panelists that will be coming up. But in all seriousness, and I know my colleagues would agree. Well, first of all, I wish I knew Dale before tonight because I opened up my email this morning, and this is totally mea culpa. I felt like I was in high school again, where everybody had all these PowerPoint slides, and I had nothing. And I succumbed to the peer pressure, so I did produce 3 slides, full disclosure. So I appreciate your grace on that. But the thing that I would really emphasize as you walk out of this gymnasium is, and I know my colleagues that I've just met and we got to talk before, we were introduced as experts, but I would challenge you to walk out of this gymnasium. You are the experts in your lives. You are the experts in Woodbridge, so make no mistake. Don't look at this as a one-off and we're just kind of having a fire hose of information and resources. I challenge you to look at this as the beginning of something. I often like to say tonight is not the Super Bowl for Woodbridge. Dale really nailed it as far as other towns are working on this and figuring this out as they should be. What they need and want for their town, their city, belongs to them. We do not want Hartford coming to Woodbridge saying, Woodbridge, here's the prescription for you. So you are the experts of Woodbridge, and I challenge you to continue this conversation, neighbor to neighbor, all of the grassroots, and you heard Phoebe inspired me on her piece around relationships, and I think I'm going to be very brief because I like what Justin said, let's listen to the audience and stimulate conversation for next steps, but I'll end the piece around what I would call relational infrastructure, and what a beautiful place Woodbridge is to live in, to work in, to love out loud together, and to joy and pursue our happiness in this beautiful town of Woodbridge. I live in Litchfield, by the way. My first slide here is just a quick snapshot of Team Inc. We are a private, nonprofit human services provider. We're actually recognizing 60 years this year, and as you can see on here, Woodbridge is part of our community footprint. We're not going anywhere. We are with you. You tap on us when you want us. You tell us to get out of the way, we'll get out of your way. And again, I'll close on how we're very deeply committed to how do we get the resident voice front and center. I'm well known for rejecting any public narrative that is imposed upon me in any chapter of my life, in all the various towns and cities that I've been privileged to live in Connecticut and to raise my family. We've responded to thousands of individuals in the last 12 months. I zeroed it down to Woodbridge alone, a little over 300 residents. And this doesn't take into account the conversational, the relational, the kind of linkage and referral of information. This 312 residents of Woodbridge is specific to what I would say a direct transactional relational type of experience, and more specifically team providing direct housing assistance, team providing direct home heating assistance. Those are the primary, the top three. The third one would be older adults and navigating Medicaid, Medicare, and various elder case management, and I say the word elder with love. I continue to level up and I get wiser and wiser, so I say with pride, I can't wait to enter that third trimester of life.
Thank you.
You got it, Dale, we're in this together. Man, I wish I knew you had no slides. And so I just, with a little tongue in cheek, I think, Michael, I heard you say a little bit about supplies, and I thought you nailed it. I would also add, having navigated the good, the bad, and the ugly of COVID-19, team was designated as an essential nonprofit. We hit 3 of the governor's public health emergencies, so we never went home. We don't know what remote means and things. And I don't say that, I just say that with, we're really in the front line. I would also say that the inability, and I say this with love to the state of Connecticut, the inability to create the full menu of housing options for all walks of life and all chapters of life, and to protect time, I don't want to get into all that, but even like the idea of starter home creation in the state of Connecticut, and far too many, I put this up here, you see the little preschool house there, my little tongue in cheek, but we can all agree that the system gets gummed up when you see little tiny homes that are suddenly like 3, 4, 5 times the cost of what they really should be, and then you have aspiring young people who want to Dale's point, they want access to capital and creating their own generational wealth, just like you and I and the collective us have, had that experience. But the system gets gummed up and they're ready to buy a starter home, but they can't, so they're holding on to that rental for a little longer. And of course, the good old supply and demand, right, Michael? And so then that balloons up the high cost of housing. And the stories, when I listen to older adults who want to enjoy that third trimester of life and look at me in the eye and say, David, I love Woodbridge. I want to stay in Woodbridge. Life is fleeting. This is my third trimester. My children don't live in Woodbridge because they don't have the opportunity to afford a home like I did. And my children aren't even in Woodbridge. That's what I challenge us to. And you hear these stories when you get deeply connected, to Phoebe's point, deeply connected to building relationships. We really geek out on the physical infrastructure. We get into gas lines, utility lines, rails, roads, physical infrastructure, brownfields in other towns and cities. And we need to. We do a terrible job at relational infrastructure. Who are we? What brings me joy to living in Woodbridge? What wakes me up at night around living in Woodbridge and knowing our neighbors? And I refuse to allow, the larger ethos of social media and news channels that keep telling us, you and I, that we are divided. Well, how do we know our neighbors? And it's so doable. In the town of Woodbridge, 9,000 plus beautiful human beings. Don't tell me we can't do that. So I want to continue to challenge you that when you walk out of here tonight, knowing you have experts and resources and checkbooks that may be available to the town of Woodbridge, but you've got to decide what you need and especially what you want for Woodbridge. And I'm telling you, just from the hundreds of individuals, and I'd argue thousands that we've connected with Woodbridge residents, there's a beautiful public narrative, not only of we want this, we can do this. And I gotta say it again, what Dale nailed, other towns and cities are figuring this out, and Woodbridge is gonna get left behind, and we don't want that to happen either. Next slide, please, Justin, and then I'll close it out. This is, repetition is the mother of learning. So I heard Justin touch on the, AMIs and all that stuff, and so, and to Dale and Michael and Phoebe's points here, just to, when you look at the industries and you look at, average median, bottom line, I took fair market rent, and I don't want to geek out on that, but that's a very lowball conservative number. And so what I took is, I took some data point from, now this is the state of Connecticut, looking at the average fair market rate for a modest 2-bedroom unit, $1,800. It's actually higher than that, but I like to keep it real low just to kind of make the point, okay? So I'm going to stick with that data so, as far as what that is. So when you translate that into how much money do I need in my pocket per hour to keep that, what you heard earlier, not becoming cost burdened or excessively cost burdened. And right here in the town of Woodbridge, 1 out of every 5 is cost burdened in the town of Woodbridge. That means for every dollar they're working their butts off for, or if they're on fixed Social Security in that 3rd trimester of life, that means for every dollar they're working their butts off for, they're spending more than 30 cents of that dollar just for the roof over their head. And that becomes a burden. That now you are entering a territory where teen is seeing and feeling it and hearing it every day, year round. Now I'm making difficult choices about, can I pay those taxes? Can I get the food on the table? Can I pay for the pay-to-play if I got kids? Can I pay for the childcare if I got younger kids? Can I keep the food on the table? Can I pay for my medical prescriptions? Can I get that quality access to the health care that I need? And I'm telling you, far too many stories of Woodbridge residents who are making difficult choices and not paying for that medical prescription. They're not going to that doctor visit because they are cost burdened for what they're paying for the roof over their head. So they're not only saddened that their kids can't live here, they're saddened by these difficult choices. And again, 1 out of every 5, walk out of here thinking 1 out of every 5 of my loving neighbors is cost burdened. And of that, 7% of that 20% are excessively cost burdened. What does that mean? That means they're spending more than 50 cents to every dollar just for that roof over their head. So you do the math and figure out, how do I get that food on the table, pay the taxes, pay the, my transportation costs, whatever that is, etc. So, and then what I translated that to is these jobs, and you heard it. And you heard those big industries. Don't we want to house our first responders right here in the town of Woodbridge? Don't we want to house, there's this bubbling presence of manufacturing and construction. I'm reading in some of the Woodbridge studies in that Dale touched on. Don't we want to house our manufacturers? Don't we want to house our teachers who are pouring themselves into the next generation? And again, far too many teachers and educators saying, and no offense, mom and dad, we're meeting 25, 26, 28-year-olds saying, I don't want to live with mom and dad forever. I want a home. And they're finding it too far out of reach, Mission Impossible. So my intent of throwing this up here is to kind of put the story behind all the geeked out data we're throwing at you about, aren't these the individuals we want to house, our older adults and so forth. Last slide and then I'll shut up. I want to applaud, first of all, I want to applaud the town of Woodbridge. I want to applaud the first selectman listening to the remarks at the beginning and again re-emphasizing that this is the beginning of something very beautiful. And having a public discourse is a really good thing. Let's talk about what we want. Let's talk about what we need. It's not going to be all kumbaya, but I have yet to not find a common ground. I've been on the ground in highly distressed communities, Waterbury, Naugatuck, Ansonia. I've been in what appears to be very well off. We're not an identified distressed community in the state of Connecticut, and standing with that, I've been to all of them about whether it's, build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything, banana I call it, but to Phoebe's point, you can actually build what you want. I think when I've been to Kent, and when I go to Orange, and all these various communities, large and small, I think what's really beautiful is that when they create these solutions and build the stuff that they want in their town as the experts of their lives in their towns, it's kind of cool that it holds on to that unique flavor of that town. And Woodbridge, you can do that. You can actually build stuff, create stuff, reimagine stuff, and still retain that very unique flavor and character of the town of Woodbridge. Just like I know the way Kent did it, I've seen Orange do it with some of their new developments, some of their deep agricultural history, and elected officials and residents who said, we still want some of the allure of what Orange is all about. And I could go on and point you to places to go visit, from Stonington to Old Saybrook, Avon, et cetera, et cetera. So I challenge you, I think 4 times I'm going to say it, don't let this be the one thing and then you walk out. I challenge you to stay committed to building relationships with your neighbors and residents. And team is here that our goal is convenient. That's our interest. Our interest is connecting people with one another, to build the stuff or reimagine the stuff that they want for themselves and their loved ones. Thank you.
We've gotten some really good questions in. If you have questions, continue to write them down. Give them to Kathy, she'll bring them up to me. But I think we've got a great one to start with here that kind of ties right into what both Dave and Dale were talking about. So we've discussed a lot about senior housing, not only in Woodbridge, but throughout the state. But data shows a huge decrease in 25 to 35-year-old residents in Woodbridge. Should we be focusing on that with efficiencies in one bedrooms? And would the age bracket create a demand for more restaurants, shops, et cetera, in the business and flats district?
Yes. No. Of course we should, because how are you going to grow your local economy if you don't attract young people to work in your businesses? But I do think, Justin, overall, Woodbridge needs a housing strategy for all residents, not just 25 to 35-year-olds. To integrate, and you mentioned seniors, I'm senior, in the first part of your sentence. So it's really integrated. And again, sensitivity to the public school system cannot be ignored. So if you have senior housing, and I'm not just talking about affordable, I'm talking about middle market, people that can afford to pay rent, you're going to have a natural turnover and attract those 25 to 35-year-old people who he pointed out very aptly that they can't live here. They're just not going to be able to live here. So I know something about Michael, the boss, Saylor, the commissioner. She's very creative. There's got to be a way, and there can be a way, I'm going to see her next week, to talk about setting up a program that would allow seniors who live in a 4-bedroom house right now, who can't take care of the whole house, and move into a middle market. It doesn't even have to be called affordable, on the condition that somebody who's 25 or 35 can move in there at a rate that's based on their income, not based on a crazy market. And that crazy, I live in an area of Camden where it's just insane. I'm happy because I'm going to make a lot of money when I sell my house eventually, but I'll be in the same boat. Where am I going to go? So I don't think there's any one thing we should focus on. I think it really needs to be integrated to a full housing strategy. Again, not just for low-income seniors, but for middle-market seniors, and even seniors should have money.
Yeah, 100%, but I would echo what Dale just said, and again, Woodbridge residents, you should be up here to answer that question. So yes, we can answer that, and I totally agree with what Dale's saying, but what do you want and what do you need for yourself and your loved ones? The 9,000 plus beautiful human beings in the town of Woodbridge. And when I do it, I hear Dale's answer. I hear what I said earlier. I don't want to repeat myself, but it needs to be the full diversity of every life chapter in all walks of life of here at Woodbridge. I walked by the child care center. That's a soft spot for me. My first job, I was a child care worker, and don't you want to help our child care workers? I can tell you right now, they're not making $90,000 a year.
And I mean, I agree with what both of these guys have said. I think that, the goal of any community should be able to house throughout the lifespan of the individuals.
Well, your POs, your plan of conservation development, that's the whole point of it, is to look at the health of the whole community, not just one demographic.
Right. Mike, anything to add? You're good?
I'm good.
All right. So continuing with the idea of age-based housing, there was an informational session at the library a couple of months ago that spoke to how even age-restricted housing is a burden to the town. Can you speak to that? I'll start with some answer and then probably turn to Dale, but I'll also turn it to Mike. So the most expensive type of housing for any community is single-family subdivision. Reason for that is you are adding remarkably more children in a single-family house than you are in obviously in an age-restricted development. And the school budget is the most expensive part of the budget in almost any community in the state. So that aspect is, I don't want to say it's incorrect, but I would be shocked to find that that's true. Mike, your thoughts?
Thanks. So, anytime you add population, there's going to be an additional cost associated with addressing the needs of that population group. To say that the older population group is a greater burden would be incorrect. We don't have a lot of statistics to back it up because changing conditions, I'll call it, in the world, change how it gets looked at, what individuals' needs are. I talked about it a little bit earlier. We're seeing an increasing need across the state for permanent supportive housing. That includes services for our aging populations, persons with mental and physical disabilities, people coming out of our institutions and assisted living nursing home. The federal government in particular has put an emphasis on taking people who are inappropriately placed in assisted living facilities and nursing homes who don't really need the services there, that can be better served by being in their community. Creating opportunities for our aging population, particularly associated with permanent supportive housing, can address that need without putting additional burden on on municipal services. It does increase the need for community-based services, but those are, pardon me, businesses. That increases your economic base, that provides job opportunities, it addresses your community's needs. And I cannot reemphasize what my partner on the other side of the aisle said. This is about what you want, what you need. We can help you get there. You just have to decide that you want to go somewhere. Doing nothing is not going to help your community to maintain where you are or to improve.
I just want to add that in my early career, I started in around 1984 and worked heavily in the development of senior housing for a good 10 years. I managed it as a property manager, and one of my first big projects is in the town next door to this gentleman, Morris, Connecticut. And I've been involved, developed 20 units of elderly housing. The community bitterly fought it. It was a classic situation. I also worked on 3 projects in Litchfield, by the way. And what they found later on was burden. They spent money in all the commercial, and Morris is way smaller than, probably about half the size or 30% of the size of Woodbridge. They were very involved on commissions, and in every community, there's such a shortage of volunteers, for example. Many people serving on multiple commissions. What they found that the seniors not only patronized all the businesses more than anybody, they volunteered for many of the commissions. They used their wisdom in the budget process. Sometimes that may not work well for the first selectman because they have more conservative or experienced, let's say, views on economics and budgeting. So it became sort of a balanced asset for the community in Morris, and it ended up being a tremendous thing. And then they also built a new senior center as part of the project. And I worked in Deep River, I worked in Litchfield, multiple projects, many towns, and it became a tremendous asset for the town. I don't even know what kind of data that is, but all I can tell you is it's more than just money. It's your infrastructure of your town, and most of all, you kept your people home where they belong in your town.
So an interesting one here. For over 100 years, Woodbridge has had a historic self-image that emphasizes a country-like character as a desirable feature of the town. This heritage continues as a belief among some that the greatest good is to defend open space from any development. The state also has the conservation of open space as a goal. How can we in Woodbridge identify the best balance between the two?
Oh, go ahead. You can start. Yeah, please.
I'll just make sort of a general comment to start the discussion about it. There are some really great opportunities to mesh conservation and housing development, and that happens in a lot of projects that get done. some of the projects in Litchfield County that LISC has been involved in, those we haven't been involved in, have had significant amounts of land that were preserved as open space as part of housing development projects. And so you'll get some really beautiful units that look just like all the units that already exist. And then you'll get some really beautiful open space that will be preserved through that deal. So it can actually be beneficial to have people come in and interested in this development, because you can really work with them, as everybody's been emphasizing tonight, to make the project something that works for your community. And in a lot of cases and a lot of communities in Connecticut, conservation is incredibly important.
Thank you, Phoebe, and I want to simply mirror what she was referencing. I talked about it a little bit earlier. People hear affordable housing and they think big, ugly buildings with lots and lots of units. That's not affordable housing in our suburban, in our rural communities. Doesn't have to be. Like, it's not what we build unless you as a community want that. I will tell you this, we will not go into a community, we will not provide assistance if the community does not support the project. It's a fundamental tenet for what we do. Okay? So that's why I will say again, you, the town of Woodbridge, the residents, decide what you want and what you need, make a plan, and we can help you implement it.
And just add, earlier in my presentation, I talked about all the really good planning things that you're doing now. And you're focusing the majority of it in a geographically, concentrated area. And you're ahead. You are really on target to maintaining that sort of vision of what Woodbridge is. But the realities are the costs never go down, whether it's housing, utilities, all the things that Michael was talking about in terms of the cost burden for housing, it never goes down. So there are always tough decisions to be made. But with whatever you're doing in what we would call the Main Street area of Woodbridge, you're already ahead of the game. There's no debate really in most cases on what you're doing. So I think your values of preservation for the most part are pretty well on course and intact.
I want to echo all of that, and I think that is one of the, I would argue that's one of the most essential questions. It's a beautiful question. Two and a half things. It reminds me of what I see and hear, and those of us at team. There's this two-sided, thick feeling in Woodbridge around, and what a beautiful country, what a beautiful tapestry, a history, Woodbridge. And there's such a deep appreciation of that. That mirrors that question. And at the same time, people are saying, however, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to stay in here 10, 15 years from now. And so that's kind of a double-sided reality. And if we do nothing, I think you know how that's going to end. And the second part of this, it kind of related to it, 2 and 3, is we can walk and chew bubblegum. The town of Woodbridge is a beautiful campus where we can actually embrace and enshrine and continue to ensconce the natural environment, and we can make it affordable for people to call it a home. People who have multiple generations here, people who want to come here and pour themselves into those industries you heard Dale speak to. It's very doable. You can actually do both and retain that forward with Woodbridge. Connected to that part, the cautionary thing I would say is keeping the predatory builders and developers out of Woodbridge. And so the more you continue to have this conversation and convene over and over around what you need and what you want, that will be the part where you need to make sure you have builders and developers who actually align and respond to what you establish in Woodbridge of what you need and you want. And you've been able to now leverage resources from state level and other level factors, but then making sure that that builder and developer aligns with your needs and your wants and doesn't just come in, do their thing, cannibalize it, and then leave. And and you, Woodbridge, are left to put those pieces back together or live with what you got. So that would be and I don't mean to terrify, and I'm not clueless to this stuff, I get around, but there's a lot of beautiful developers and builders, and there are predatory ones. So always ask that question as you get ready to do what you need and want for town of Woodbridge. Who are the actors in there?
I think what I would add to that too is, a lot of what we're hearing and a lot of what I've seen in my time at Woodbridge is this is a beautiful community. I mean, the landscape, the development, it's quintessential New England. It's charming. It's beautiful. It's people love living here. And so I think to sort of, build on what David said, it's really about intentional development. How do we focus development in a way that is not the Section 8 housing of old, but the new affordable housing and the new housing developments that can help to spur the economy in town, help to build the tax base to make sure that we are still maintaining that character that we all love, while also ensuring that the tax base is resilient and thriving into the future. All right.
Justin?
Yeah.
Can I first, I want to thank Phoebe, that what you said just resonated with me personally in terms of how you started this particular part of the conversation. I just also wanted to add that from my perspective, I find myself in a relatively unique situation sometimes when I get together with my family and they'll say, how's it going? And how's it going with the town? And I find myself saying, well, I've really found a unique way to really get everybody upset with me. Because I'm not doing enough on one side and I'm doing too much on the other side. And I sincerely and truly believe that there's a balance, that there's got to be a balance, and we can find it. So along the lines of what everybody here said, it's, as I said, I do hear from both sides. I understand that it's a very difficult, it's a very challenging, it's a very emotional type of a conversation, but the reality is that you're hearing it from people who, they see it all over the state. These people have been experienced in terms of what we just are going through now. And there is a way to do it. There is a way to do it. There's no doubt that there's a way to do it. And there's people here who are more than willing to help us. So, thank you.
Mika, while you have the mic, I'm going to ask a question that I don't think anybody up here can really answer, and I don't want to put you on the spot either, but I can answer the first part of this. So the question here is, would Woodbridge or any Connecticut town consider a reduction in the cost of building permits to encourage the construction of affordable housing? I can tell you that some towns in Connecticut do that. They will either reduce or eliminate building permit fees for certain types of development that they're trying to entice into town. But I can't speak to Woodbridge specifically. So
It's not something we've specifically spoken about in the context of building permits related to what we're saying, what the question really addresses. What I will say is that, for example, there's something that we've identified is a possibility or being considered or being spoken up at the legislatures as relates to ADUs and those counting toward the affordable stock, if you will. And from that context, we've already started having conversations internally to see what can we do to incent that. Maybe we don't add taxes we defer taxes on that or that type of thing. What I can tell you is that nothing's out of the question. One of the reasons and one of the benefits of having the town planner that we do is specifically to talk about these things, and particularly as relates to zoning and permits and things of that nature. And that's one of the things that Justin and I have been working on for a while now is in our business district, what zoning changes do we need to make? What potential is there for something creative, something different that would enable us to attract, keep, or expand what we have down there?
there is a part B to that question. Would Woodbridge consider lowering tax rates for industrial enterprises to encourage their establishment in Woodbridge?
Our EDC has already put together a plan for tax credits, tax programs that could help new businesses coming in. I can tell you what we can offer is not, I don't see, so far it hasn't been because we haven't really gotten a lot of takers, and I don't see it as being significant enough to really make a difference, particularly with our mill rate being at 46 plus as it was before. Things have changed a little bit. Our commercial district will benefit from some of the revaluation that has happened here. So that could change. That could really make a difference in terms of what's happening. But what we are doing is paying attention. Steve Francis is here from our EDC. It's a discussion that they've had months ago, and it's one that we'll continue to have in terms of what can be done. So hopefully that answers.
I just want to add to that. In my prior role, okay, forget about that. In my prior role working for the community, I worked for 6 different mayors, so they must have liked what we did with our EDC. I probably did something like, we had a commercial tax abatement program through state, the town was empowered by state statute. And I found that they did over 150 different projects. You know, small mom and pop renovations to big companies building a building. And what I found is that most businesses coming to town are interested in the quality of life and the workforce that exists in the town. And what I always recommended to my EDCs is if you're going to have an incentive program, and there should be something on the books as a tool because you never know what somebody's going to want, it should be based on capital investment more than just coming here. They're coming here for the workforce and the quality of life in the school system, public safety, all those things are part of our community fabric. But if you're going to have a program, I found the most effective ones to affect that $1.3 million you need to raise to affect taxation, having one that's based only on capital investment. Otherwise, you could welcome here, but they're not coming here for that reason. They're coming here for your workforce and the quality of life. That's my thought on it anyway.
Let me just add to that. Economic development really, it's like water or electricity. It follows the path of least resistance. So it's going to go to an area where there is the best path for it to succeed. So that means that it can't take too long for things to get approved. It can't be overly restrictive on things like really intense bulk requirements and zoning regulations and things like that. So as the first selectman pointed out, one of the things that we've been working on is trying to identify where those roadblocks might be, to identify how we can encourage business development in the future to really get things in. It may be tax incentives, it may be zoning regulation amendments. It could be a lot of different things, but that's something we're analyzing right now.
I guess, my brain starts to fire up when we get onto this topic, but, just on workforce alone, they want to know if the workforce is here, who lives here, but they also want to know if there's programs and creative things that you can do with your public school system, with Amity High School, to help prepare kids for the workforce. They want to partner. If there's a program that you could set up to partner with businesses, with your high school, that's a home run, and that's an incentive enough for them to come here, just for that.
Dale and I can keep talking about it.
I know, sorry.
But we'll switch back to the housing. Phoebe, I get the sense this one might be good for you, but anybody who knows about this can feel free to jump in. My daughter is a case manager at HomeShare Vermont. It seems to me to be the most cost-effective way to get people housed without new construction. It has worked well in Vermont for decades. Have you heard of interest in this? If the community wanted to pursue this, who might they partner with?
To clarify, they're pursuing home care?
Home share.
Home share. Okay, thank you. There was a echo. I haven't heard too much about home sharing services. I heard a little bit about it in my previous position in the context of Western Connecticut, where there are a lot of larger homes, which is also the case with some homes here. So I've heard a little bit about it as kind of an option for some people. Generally, I think there's mixed feelings on it. I think it can sort of help situations, but I also think that people who are looking for housing don't always want to share their housing. I think people look for places and situations where they can put down roots. So it kind of goes both ways, but I think that's where I'll stop on that before I dig a hole.
Thanks. And there have been discussions at the state level about expanding or looking into home share opportunities. Fundamentally, to have an effective home share program, you need an organization or an entity that is focused on supporting both partners in that shared environment. We've seen a lot of failures in other parts of the country where they basically just say, oh, I'm looking for a roommate, or I'm looking for somebody to share my home, and there's no organization or entity behind it to help manage that relationship, to manage the issues that come with a home sharing environment. Understand, when it comes to home sharing, you are literally sharing the living space between two unrelated individuals who don't know anything about each other. It has the potential to work great, and it has the potential to be explosive. You need that strong social service provider, that organization, who's there to support both parties, work out issues, and make it work. We have looked at it. We haven't actually done any home sharing at the state level. It is something that we looked at many times over my career, and I've been doing this just under 40 years. It is not something that's ever launched, and fundamentally it comes back to you need that one strong service organization that wants to make it its driving purpose in order to make something like that effective.
Mike, while you got the mic, I think this one's here to you. Given that Connecticut is a sanctuary state, how much process does the immigrant community place on Connecticut housing, and how is DOH addressing that need?
So we do not ask, relative to our state units, we do not ask or research immigration status for occupancy in any of the state financed units that we support. I don't see any wood around here on the floor hanging out. We have not had any issues to date in any of our units that we know of. We hope it stays that way. Because we do not collect that data, because we do not share that data, because that data, if we did have possession of it, it is protected by Connecticut General Statute as confidential. We are, in fact, prohibited from sharing that kind of data with anyone, let alone the federal government. Should it be an issue, all I can say is there are plans in place on how we will deal with it should the occasion arise. I cannot discuss them. I don't want to say we're fully prepared, but we as a state are looking at the issue across the board. Every state agency is looking at preparing plans for how to deal with whatever may come as a result of the federal government's new immigration policies.
So that is all of the note cards I have. We've got about 6 minutes. Is there any other questions? If not, I'll ask one to kind of wrap things up here. So one of the really unique things about Woodbridge right now is that the school population is increasing. It's not something that we see in a lot of towns. I work in a lot of communities throughout the state. I know that we all do. And typically what we see is a decline in school population. So Woodbridge is unique in that sense. So while most towns are seeing that decrease, how would new housing developments put an additional strain on Woodbridge, and what could be done to address that issue? I think that's a lot of people's concerns. I've heard a lot of people saying that the classroom sizes are too large already. So what will happen if new housing gets added into town, and how do we address that concern?
I'll start quick. It in large part depends on what housing opportunities you create. As Gail pointed out, a lot of new development is studios and one bedrooms. You're not going to generate a lot of children when you create studios and one bedrooms. The issue is the units that they're vacating. Okay, so I've got a 3 or 4 bedroom house that's underutilized right now. I got a single individual, maybe an older couple, and then that housing unit can no longer be maintained. Its value is decreasing. It's potentially impacting property values in neighboring properties and in the neighborhood. So I would argue you need to find, and somebody else said it better than I can, you need to find the balance. You need to figure out what you need and how to make it work for your community to have the impact that you want while limiting the impact that you don't. We talked about it a little bit on being specific. Some people call them older active adult communities. Single-family homes owned by people who are aging. They're just smaller, easier to maintain, master bedroom on the first floor, handicapped accessible bathroom, in a reasonable cost range. That can serve your community well, based on the demographics that we see. Can you produce it? Do you have a place for it? Is it something you want? Those are questions only you can answer. Are there opportunities? The answer is yes. So do you want to take advantage of those to the long-term benefit? Not today, not tomorrow, but as Dale said, 10 years, 15 years from now. That's what you need to plan for, and that's what you need to make happen. You need to start the ball rolling now. I didn't mention it, I'll say it. From initial thought to production and occupancy, housing takes 3 to 5 years. Okay? It's not a joke. There are experts in the audience who will back this up. From the minute you say, I want to put housing here, to when you actually get a body moving in, is anywhere from 3 to 5 years. That means, if you have a need today, the best opportunity to address it is at least 3, but more likely 5 years from now. So if you understand where you're going, you need to start to think about starting the ball rolling right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike, for taking my hands for this. Sorry, but I would just add to that, looking at it from 40,000 feet up, you need a housing strategy for all residents of Woodbridge. Not all seniors are going to want to move out of their home, for example. You're going to have all different needs. A lot of seniors can't stay in their home. Maybe there's a part of the population of Woodbridge that where the town needs to find in-home care in their homes. I talked to Mika a little bit about this. So there's going to be needs all over the place. Maybe some seniors just need to have their house fixed up so they can move around from a perspective of ADA. But I do think you need a housing strategy for all residents so that you can control and really get a handle on how many families are going to move in. As seniors move into apartments they can afford, there's going to be a natural turnover. If you don't do anything, you can't control that turnover. You can get a big blast of people that leave their homes for a variety of health reasons, and then you have no control over it. So I think having a good strategy for the town, for all residents, will help really mitigate that impact on the public school system.
It is 8:29, so I will turn it back over to Kathy.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and I also wanted to make sure if there was anybody that wanted to ask a direct question and not through another card, because we did have that option, but it seemed like the new card system didn't work.
What's the next step? People here wanted to talk about this more, like in a more informal setting. Are there any?
Well, the Housing Committee is planning to have more informational sessions again, so, and I just wanted to call your attention, we have our little yellow sheet back there. If there's other topics that you do want to hear from town housing, please let us know. And we are planning to have much more conversations, community conversations, and more informational sessions. So I have to say, this conversation tonight I thought was just fantastic. And I just want to thank the panelists for taking the time for being out here tonight. Help to change the hearts and minds of people in Woodbridge. So thank you.
Lastly, in regards to next steps, there are things that are happening in town right now that people need to speak about. There's going to be a hearing in regards to a new development. We are constantly having forums in regards to the country club. So there are things that are happening. So as far as next steps are concerned, speak up. Speak up in terms of what you're looking for. I know there's a number of people in this room who do and have. But it's important that if there's something you'd like to say, that you participate in those and let us know. We do listen. Very much so we listen. So And we will absolutely, working with Kathy and the housing committee, as far as housing is concerned, we'll put some, next thing we'll do is we'll do more of a formal, like just question and answer type of session where people can just, we wanted to set the stage, we wanted to set a foundation today. And so the next step will be more of a, just a back and forth type of a panel question and answer type situation. So. You guys have been great. I gotta tell you, thank you very much. And thank